We spend a lot of time learning, understanding ideas, concepts, frameworks. But there's a gap that most people never cross. The gap between understanding something and actually living it. In the language of Torah, that gap is the difference between Bina and Das. Bina is when something makes sense. Das is when what you understand and how you actually live are aligned. When what you know becomes the way you experience and respond to reality. This series is about closing that gap. Taking ideas that we understand intellectually and turning them into something real, something lived, something that shapes how we see everything that happens in our lives. We'll be working with Torah teachings that approach this with precision and structure. Not just what to believe, but how reality actually works and how to operate within it correctly. So this is not a series about inspiration. It's a series about process, a structured path from Bina to Das. Welcome back, my friends, to another episode of the Shema podcast. And before I delve into the subject matter at hand, this amazing, brilliant essay by Rabbi Ashlag, the Baha Salam, I want to explain the way I've been sort of organizing this podcast. I mentioned in an episode at the end of the calendar year how I realized back in Elul, before Rosh Hashanah, as I always do, I always sort of evaluate how I'm spending my time, make sure I'm using it efficiently. This last year before Rosh Hashanah, I realized that the direction I had been already going into that I wanted to sort of refine further is having more deliberate, thought out structure to the episodes. The way I'm organizing this podcast now is basically like a curriculum. I want to, when you go to the podcast, to know specifically what you're going there to learn. Because really nothing I'm covering is something that should be passively listened to. I mean, really everything falls under this idea of this series of Bina to Das is taking ideas from being abstract and making them a part of our life. So the way I'm structuring the podcast now is the Shema podcast is like a channel that you go to, but then you'll always find a series. A series will be like a show on that channel. And that way you'll know in your mind what you're about to learn. A lot of the teachings I've done over the last year from the essays of the Baha Sulam, and I would say other teachings that I've read from that have gone into those, like the structure path, the Dveikus, or the last one I gave on the Pesach Seder, understanding the system of redemption that drew on his teachings as well. All these teachings are all about this idea, providing very defined, practical steps to take Torah ideas out of our mind and integrate them into who we are. Really, I would say that is how to define whether you know something, which is Das, or whether you just have Bina, understanding. The difference is Das is when, in knowing something, is when your behavior is consistent with the idea. That is the clear-cut way of knowing whether you have Das. I learned many years ago of how becoming angry is like idolatry. You obviously are not believing that Hashem controls everything and for the good. But it doesn't mean that the moment I heard that lesson the first time that I immediately stopped losing my temper and getting frustrated at situations when they weren't working out the way I wanted them to. Because again, there's a gap between Bina and Das. And the beauty of these essays is he really breaks down how to do this, how to go from Bina to Das. My goal is to do a couple of episodes per month, and that's going to be challenging at first, although I expect it will get easier over time. And the reason for the challenge is that the first time I read one of his essays, I have no idea what he's saying until I start to really drill down and contemplate it. And over time, I'm starting to get a feel for his language, how he expresses himself, and just sort of understand and interpret the ideas that he's conveying. So I am getting more efficient. But even then, after I've really have gone through and broken down one of his essays, you have to live with it. You have to experience it step by step before I get in front of the microphone and discuss the idea with you. That's the goal. And, at first I'm going to be working through this collection of essays from the Baha Sulam. I barely cracked the surface on this text, and it's only volume 1. So there's a lot to chew on here. And I think when applicable, I want to do like I did for the structured path to Dvaikus, which I got a lot of feedback on, positive feedback, where I created a worksheet, and I also created AI instructions to help guide you in the tool set of, which is what that episode was about, which is redeeming the imagination. We're going to be talking a lot on this series about Bina and Das. We'll also spend time talking a lot about what we spoke about on the other episode, the structure path of Dvaikus, on how the faculties of intelligence and imagination fit into that equation. And what we learned together on that episode is that imagination and intelligence get hijacked to replace bitachon, trust in Hashem, which of course now you're using two of your most powerful faculties to distance yourself from Hashem versus bringing yourself closer to Hashem, which is of course the goal. The other thing that will come up quite a bit is that the written Torah from the Exodus through the time in the Midbar, in the wilderness, is all the template for what we're learning. So we'll be constantly going back to and referencing that point in our national history, but it's also in our occurring regularly and in cycles in our personal psyche, because it's a framework for us in our personal lives. And that's really where all this Torah is all coming from. So this article is called "You Have Made Me in Behind and Before." And what he is going to be teaching us is how to take an idea that we've all heard before and begin to experience the idea. The idea being that everything comes from Hashem. Hashem controls everything. Again, ideas that we have heard, but as you'll see, and as you contemplate on your own, for most of us, we're not living it. But if we learn this and we contemplate it, we'll be able to do this more and more, because he really does provide a step-by-step guide in this area. The other thing I want to ask before I get into this is that you must commit that you will listen to the full podcast. And the reason I'm saying that is not for some egotistical reason that I want you to hear me throughout the entire episode. It's not it. The reason I say that, and you need to make that commitment, is because I'm going to share a truth that one must accept and another truth that one must accept, but they're going to create a paradox. So if you hear just one of those truths and then move on and never go back and listen to the rest, you'll be stuck in what is called, what he describes as the klipa of Yishmael. And if you were just to hear the other truth and not hear the prior one, you would get stuck in what's called the klipa of Esau. We'll get in what all this means. And again, in this series and Nothing I Do, we're going to be leaving things in very figurative language. Everything is going to be laid out very concrete. As a matter of fact, a lot of the language we have heard in the past, Kabbalistic language about elevating sparks and all these ideas that sound so cool, but in the end, we have no idea what they mean. You will after this episode is over, because he gets to the heart and the cusp of what that means and how to do it. The first idea that we have heard before, but we really need to think through this and contemplate it, is that, and for many of us, if you're listening to this and you're newer to Torah learning and newer to this podcast, this may be a new idea to you. So slow down, whatever you're doing. If you're driving in your car, maybe hit the pause button and come back to this episode. But we do not control any outcomes. Many of us know this. We've heard this. Again, we have Bina on it. We don't have Das. We literally do not control any outcomes. He created a world with the illusion of systems and mechanisms that seems mechanical, and that if you do X, you'll have Y output. If you do A, you'll have B output, etc. When it comes to livelihood, when it comes to health, there are certain things we do, and we expect certain outcomes. And we'll focus on this, I think, on two predominant ways with regard to physicality, and that is with health and with money. So let's examine these ideas, but not on a personal level, because when we do introspection on a personal level, then our Yetzer Hara flares up and tries to block us seeing reality, because its goal is to get us to live in the illusion. The purpose of this essay is to break out of the illusion. So let's be strategic here, since our Yetzer Hara does not want us to break out of the illusion. Let's look at the world at large. I was told growing up the way the system worked is you worked hard in school, educated yourself, went to college, got a good education, and worked for a good company, carefully chose the industry you worked for, the business you started with. And there's all these certain things that you do, these levers you push and levers you pull. And through those efforts of pushing and pulling those levers, that it will produce the outcome you want: career success and financial abundance. But one thing I've noticed now at the age of 56 is that none of that is true. I think we all know that. The people I know who are the most financially successful people did not go to college and barely graduated high school. Many tell me they have never read a book since high school. I am not kidding you. So as far as academic excellence as a prerequisite for making big fortunes, not true. Now, it doesn't mean that they don't educate themselves in what they need to know to run their business. That is for sure. But the idea that there is some levers that they are pushing and pulling, and that is creating the outcome, it's not really what we're being told, because I know plenty of people who went to college and were very intelligent people who struggle financially to this day. So that doesn't make any sense. What is it? And you have this entire self-help industry that is focused on identifying the common denominator between successful people, and then they sell you their books and podcasts and audio tapes and seminars and workshops on how you can apply their principles to get rich. But the fact is, I know, like many people, and I'm not taking anything away from Tony Robbins, he's great, the work he's done, but the truth is, his story of going from being impoverished to being wealthy, do you know how he went from being impoverished to becoming wealthy? He wrote and sold a book on how to go from being impoverished to wealthy, and did workshops on that and seminars. So he became wealthy by telling people, here's how you become wealthy. The bottom line is there are no levers that one can push and pull to guarantee the outcome they want with financial success. Why? Because it all comes from Hashem. The fact that he lets people believe that is part of the illusion. It's what allows free will to exist. It creates the opportunity for us to perfect ourselves. And if someone wants to live in the illusion, if they've been having lots of success throughout their life, and they take great pride on it, and they're arrogant because all the success they built, they're going to want to hold on to the illusion that the levers they're pushing and pulling cause that success. The question we all have to ask ourselves is, there will come a point in time when Hashem shows you that wall where all the levers and pulleys were hooked up to, that you thought that pulling and pushing, all those levers were connected to the broader economy and causing your economic success to occur, you will eventually learn that when you look at the other side of the wall, those pulleys and levers are not attached to anything. The question is whether that gets revealed to you after you die, when it happens for all of us. And someone who thought their entire life was business success, and that's what they felt great pride in, was the wealth they accumulated, and they realized it was all Hashem in the end, and then they are stuck realizing, well, then what do I do the whole time I was there? We don't want that to happen. Hashem, if we're on the spiritual path, will eventually show us, like he showed me, that it's not attached to anything. Another maybe imagery to have in your mind is toddlers sitting in the backseat of a car with a play steering wheel hooked up to their car seat. And they're turning the steering wheel thinking they're driving the car, going right, going left. Eventually they get a little older and realize that steering wheel, a little plastic steering wheel, isn't attached to anything. That's us. That is us. We are sitting in the back seat with a plastic steering wheel, and at the risk of going through our whole life thinking that we're actually driving the car, when Hashem's sitting in the front seat driving the car. So we have to accept this. It's difficult that we're not controlling these outcomes, even health. I mean, I've seen this. I mean, for my own personal life, at least I have had a good habit of working out. That started at a very young age because we moved every year. I was dealing with bullies every year. It was, working out was not because of winning a trophy on a sports team. It was survival because a lot of these neighborhoods were very rough, and I would see kids getting their face pummeled in, and I did not want to have my face pummeled into the ground. Although it did happen on occasion, I was able to minimize that, especially considering the number of times after school when I was in these fights. So I did have that habit built in very early on. However, if you look at my 20s, as a young stockbroker in the 90s, the market would close at 3 o'clock. My partner and I would go to the Texas Club, and we had a team of younger guys that were working for us, and this is before computers, so they would have to wrap up trade reconciliation and notes and all this stuff. And we would have them work on that. We would go to the Texas Club next door, and we would work out. We'd get a massage, and then we'd meet up at the bar. This is the way I knew gyms. They had an actual bar where you got cocktails after you worked out. To me, that was what you do after a good workout, was you have a glass of scotch. I remember when I moved to the suburbs with my wife and we joined the Lifetime Fitness. And after the first day there, I came out of the locker room all showered and cleaned up, waiting for my wife. I sat down at the bar and said, "I will take a Macallan 12-year. The lady looked at me like I was out of my mind and says, "Sir, we do not sell alcohol here." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean? What do you have?" And she said, we have smoothies. I was like, who the hell wants to drink a smoothie after their workout? Like, you have a good, vigorous workout, take a shower, you clean up, a nice scotch. It's perfect. A smoothie, that's disgusting. But you look at my lifestyle in my 20s, I went out and would 3 to 4 nights out of the week, just get hammered with the guys. Like, not just have a few drinks, but just really get wrecked. And if someone had drugs, they say, "I got some cocaine. You want to do some lines?" Sure. This pill? Sure. If it was there, I threw it in my mouth. I didn't care. And that's how I lived throughout my entire 20s. So if you had gone back in my 20s and looked at how I had lived during the weeks, just partying nonstop. If you had looked at me and met me and followed my lifestyle for a week, you would have said, "This guy, Dan Coleman, won't make it past 40, for sure." There's no way. Yet I know people that lived a very clean lifestyle, stay away from alcohol, went to bed early every night, got they're good, recommended 8 hours sleep, exercise regularly, very clean diet, cardio, strength training, meditation, did everything right. And unfortunately died while in their 30s from a heart-related illness, cancer. I mean, it doesn't make sense. They were pushing and pulling all the right levers, and they died in their 30s. And here I am going strong at 56, and I had lived like an absolute maniac in my 20s. Doesn't make sense. And the idea is, it doesn't make sense if we think that we are controlling outcomes, and we are not. Before I proceed on this topic, I want to explain the title of his article, his essay, "You Have Made Me Behind and Before." Behind means seeing Hashem only in hindsight, and before means seeing Hashem in real time. And the goal of the essay is to see Hashem in real time. Let me make this real for a second. Something goes wrong in your life, and immediately your mind goes to the system. What did I do wrong? What didn't work? What do I need to fix? That's living in behind. You're already inside the system. Before is when you interpret that and say, "This is coming from Hashem right now, even though I don't understand it." That's the shift. So we bring this back to our personal life. The way we experience Hashem behind, and over time, as time goes on, you build more runway when you look into the past, you see wow, Hashem was guiding everything the whole time. So that's seeing Hashem in hindsight. That's Hashem making us from behind. To shift means to see this real time. And this is what we need. This is what we're going after. This is what the whole world will see in the time of Mashiach. But it's our job those of us listening here, to live in reality now. We all pray for Mashiach to come, but if we want to actually do something to bring it about, we have to start living in this reality now. So the world, the illusion of the world is that everything is cause and effect. And this is how Hashem hides himself in the world. And as I said before, it allows for our free will to exist. The illusion of the cause and effect is what the Baal Salam refers to as clothing, the clothing of Hashem, how he interacts in the world. Or more Kabbalistic terminology, it is the klipa. And as we've heard in the past, the idea of revealing the sparks, there are no visible sparks. The way we reveal Hashem in the world is by recognizing real time, that we are not controlling any outcome and only he is. Much easier said than done. That's why this takes work, especially if you're someone older like me who's learning these things for the first time. I mean, and granted, I've been learning Torah for a while now, for 15 years. I've heard these ideas, but it's hard to let go because you live in a world for so long where you really think everything's like there's some mechanical system and you're controlling things. And even as we'll get into, I thought with mitzvos that they were also part of a system as well of cause and effect. And the Baal Salam clears that up. That is not the case. We'll get into the importance and what the role is of mitzvos. So this is really about just changing our awareness and consciousness as we experience life. Now, with all that said, the paradox with all this is that you can't not engage the process. This is what's so challenging. Because if you take that idea that you don't control any outcome, then you can fall into what he describes as the klipa of Yishmael, where if I don't control the outcome, why bother? But the fact is that you have to act. You have to be involved with the process. Now, the opposite of that is the klipa of Esau, where they think they're in total control of everything and think they are controlling the outcome. That is obviously not the path either. What we have to hold in our mind is these two opposites, this paradox, this tension. This is what can be challenging and why it takes some time to live with this reality. And that's why I said you had to listen to the whole podcast, because I didn't want someone just to listen to the beginning and think, okay, well, the lesson Dan was teaching is I had control no outcomes. So I was on my way to the office, but I ended up going to a bar instead because who cares? It doesn't work that way. You still have to engage in the process, but at the same time, recognize that what you're doing does not control the outcome. And we actually have a model for this in Yaakov Avinu. When he's about to encounter Esau, he does three things at once. He prepares for war, he sends gifts, and he prays to Hashem. He's fully engaged in the system, but at the same time, he knows none of this is what determines the outcome. That's the synthesis. That's how you hold both. The Baal Salam provides a three-step process for holding this paradox and these two opposite worldviews together, because that is the synthesis, is bringing these two ideas together, is that we all have to engage in the process. We all heard, like with livelihood or anything, livelihood, health, you have to do your histaltus. If you're a salesperson, you have to follow your sales process. Even in the end, knowing Hashem's going to control the outcome, whether if the salesman makes that sale or does not make that sale is entirely up to Hashem. In the end, too, it doesn't control your parnasa. All parnasa is coming from Hashem. So the three-step process is 1, surrender, 2, separation, 3, acceptance. Surrender being this is just what's happening. You're doing the process, whatever the results are, going back to the example of the salesman, whatever happens, happens. It's surrendering, detaching from the outcome. It's in separation, that whatever the outcome is, it's not because of what you did or what you did not do. You did your best, you followed your sales process, and whether the sale occurred or did not occur is not something that you caused. You're doing Havdalah, you're separating from that reality. Hashem wants you to go through the process, but knowing that you don't control the outcome. And when that process doesn't lead to the results you wanted, acceptance. This is not wrong, even if I don't understand it. And just to be clear, this sounds simple when things are going well, The real test is when something doesn't go your way. That's when this actually becomes a real avoda. Again, surrender, you're engaged, you're acting, you're doing the process. Again, I think something we mentioned before, the pathway from Bina to Das, what exists between Bina and Das is action. You take the action, you do what's necessary. Same with health. Yes, Hashem controls when we live, when we die, whether we're sick or whether we get healthy. All these things Hashem controls. That does not relinquish us from doing our histaltus, of eating healthy, of taking care of ourselves, of getting exercise. All these things we are required to do. That's why a major first portion of Shulchan Aruch is on proper exercise, diet, proper sleep, all the things around keeping our body healthy. But again, we don't control the outcome. It reminds me of something Rabbi Yokov Wolbe told me early on about how they would have these Rosh Yeshivas that would pass away at the age of 120 and pass the baton of leadership to their underling who was just the mere age of 99, right? And these are people who chain smoked unfiltered cigarettes. At the time, they didn't know that chain smoking unfiltered cigarettes was bad for you. So their histaltus did not require them quitting. Now I would say it would, but then they didn't know. But they still lived to 120. Why? Because Hashem wanted them to live to 120. They were teaching his Torah. So just an example of how we're not controlling the outcome, but we have to put in our effort. And I want to add something important here. This doesn't just apply when things go wrong. It applies when things go right. Because when things go wrong, we question. But when things go right, we believe the system works. And that's actually more dangerous because failure shakes the illusion, but success will strengthen it. So when something works, the avoda, Hashem, is the same. This didn't come from me. It came through me, not because of me. The other important point that the Baal Salam makes is the power of our speech. And speech, Kabbalistically, is always associated with das, because when we speak something, it determines how we experience reality. So we have to be very careful. And this is, I think, another clear action item, and something we have to be so cognizant of, is how we describe things that are occurring. In business, I made that deal come through. No, you didn't. Don't say it. Hashem made the deal come through. You did the necessary action, and through that action, Hashem allowed the deal to come through. So instead of saying I think the principal rule, instead of saying with business or with health, that this worked because of X, this worked because I have a great product, this worked because I had this relationship, this worked because I was so persuasive, this worked because I go for a run every day or do this exercise, and that's why I have this good health. Instead, say this came through X. This blessing came through that act because the source of it all is Hashem. So speech either reinforces the illusion or reveals the truth. The way you speak is the way you experience reality. Again, and this is the whole idea of revealing sparks, bringing holiness in the world, revealing Hashem in the world. It's going into real time with this as things are occurring to verbalize it in this way. Do you remember those steps of surrender, separation, acceptance? And to make sure we are verbalizing things in that manner. The verbalization of it in the proper manner, revealing the truth of it with our speech is what's going to continue to build the truth in our mind, in the way we perceive things. There's another idea the Baal Salam brings out here that's very important. What does it mean to serve Hashem? We usually think it means what you do, but he reframes it completely. Serving Hashem is not just action. It's how you relate to what's happening. Two people can live the same life, do the same actions. One is serving Hashem and one is not. The difference is, do you see Hashem as the cause or the system as the cause? And finally, where do mitzvos fit into all this? We say in the Shema that we will do certain things and Hashem will bless us with rain, with all types of blessings. But we have to clarify that we're not interacting with an independent system of cause and effect. This is about relationship, not mechanism. For instance, too, giving tzedakah. Give tzedakah, it will come back to us and make us wealthy. It's not a mechanized system. It's a promise from Hashem. It's not a machine. Sometimes what's in our best interest is to receive money instantaneously back from giving tzedakah. Sometimes what's in our best interest is to have the money returning to us be delayed. More on that on the next episode, God willing. That is on the next essay I covered. Revealed so much to me on this whole matter. I'm so glad I came across it. I wish I'd come across it a year ago, but Hashem wanted me to struggle with it, find this essay, because I'm telling you, that whole area where Hashem was not returning anything, could not figure it out, was frustrating. No rabbis knew the answer to it. But this essay from the Baal Salam explains it in all its detail. We'll get to that on the next episode. So what is the purpose of mitzvos? Mitzvos are there to cleanse us from the klipa. Again, what is the klipa? To define that word now, it is the illusion. Klipa is the illusion of cause and effect in the world. That there is an independent system of cause and effect. I eat healthy, I'll be healthy. I work hard, I'll make money. That is klipa. It is an illusion. Again, we have to do those things, eat healthy and work hard, but we don't do it with a mindset of controlling the outcome, because that is to basically keep the fruit. What is the fruit inside the klipa? It is Hashem. It's a revelation of Hashem. Our job is to remove the klipa and reveal Hashem, the fruit. And the way we do that is through acknowledging this reality and verbalizing it in everything that occurs to us. So think like this, to sort of wrap things up. We have to be fully engaged with the world, but we have to know that not to be dependent on our efforts. We have to be dependent on Hashem, because that's where everything's going to come from. This also is very freeing, because sometimes, we struggle with, well, I need to attend to business, but I need to have my set Torah learning. I still struggle with how much with each, but we know in the end, we're not going to miss our davening. We're not going to miss our Torah learning, because Hashem doesn't want us to. So in the end, it's not going to hurt our livelihood. Nothing in your life changes when you move from behind to before. Same world, same events. The only thing that changes is what you recognize as the cause, and that changes everything. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening, and if you enjoyed the episode and found it meaningful, please take a moment to rate, review, and share the podcast.